Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the start of my art journey here on YouTube. Today, I'll be showing you how I took this 1/6 scale 3D model of Ahsoka sculpted by CA 3D Studios from this to this. I already completed parts of this model as I wasn't sure if I wanted to make a video. I'm introverted by nature and I'm probably too hard on myself. So I came up with a bunch of reasons, more like excuses as to why I shouldn't make videos. No one will like your work. Your voice sounds terrible. You don't know how to make videos. Blah, blah, blah. But I decided not to listen to my damn brain messing with me, so here we are. Anyways, that's enough yapping. I'll start off with the legs. I use wolf gray from 2 thin coats, thinned down with some Vallejo airbrush thinner. You can use water. I just had this bottle forever and I wanted to finish it up. You want the paint thin so it sprays smooth and have control of how saturated the color is. I have my compressor set around 20 psi. Since the torso uses the same paints as the legs, I'll be jumping back and forth between the parts while they dry. I mask off part of the torso that had previously been painted with silly putty. By the time I'm done spraying the torso, the legs are dry. I use Drakenhof Nightshade from Citadel to tint the color to what I want. I get some overspray, but I'm not too worried as I'll be spraying that a dark silver. The same Drakenhof Nightshade is used on the torso. Once I'm happy with the color, it's time to bring some depth into the shadows. I spray some more of the Drakenhof Nightshade at the bottom of her robes and in some of the folds, making them darker. It's subtle, but it adds more to the model. In the same vein, I take wolf gray that I used as the base color to highlight some of the parts to increase the contrast between the light and the shadows. Damn, I missed the spot. I try to be lazy and just spray Drakenhof Nightshade without any base coat, but since it's black, it doesn't do too much. I'll fix this off camera. This was the first time that I've painted a skin tone that isn't natural, but I start like I do any other skin tone. Using violet red from Vallejo, I airbrush where we have our zenithal highlights. Then, using some red ink from Liquitex, I airbrush it in the shadows. I pay attention to get some under the nose and in the eye sockets. Now, it's time to figure out what colors I need to get the look I want. I start with Base Flesh from the Nocturna Fantasy set as my base coat. I thin the paints around 50-50, as I don't want to completely cover the violet and red undertones. Then I turn my compressor down between 15 and 20 psi. I rotate between her face and her arms. As one dries, I spray another, and by the time I come back to the first, it's already dry. Next, I use Burnt Orange from Pro Acryl. After checking my reference images a bunch, I decide it's the closest match I have to Ahsoka's skin tone. I continue to thin my paints about 50-50 so I don't completely cover the layers below. The idea is to slowly build up the colors layer by layer. You can always add more color, but it's a pain to remove it. Now, it's time for some highlights. I've used white to lighten my skin tones in the past, but I didn't like the look that it gave. I also do not think it would look good with the warm skin tones we have for Ahsoka. So I decided to test out Pale Yellow from Pro Acryl to lighten up the same burnt orange that we used previously. I mix this even thinner. I try to have as much water as I can get away with before the paint starts to break up. I want this super thin so I can build up the highlights slowly and have more control. I decide where the light would hit the model as I'm doing my zenithal highlights. I keep this in mind during this highlight step and hit the spots where the light would be brightest. For the face, I focus on the forehead, nose, top of the cheekbones, and chin. If you have trouble imagining a light source, you could put your model together, then shine a light from where you want your light source to be and take a picture. You can refer to your picture later on to give you an idea of where to put your highlights. I use a mix of Nomad Flesh from the Army Painter and red ink to get a deeper contrast in the shadows. I feel like the skin tone is slightly off from what I want, so I use thinned down Fugan Orange shade from Citadel. Normally for shades, I don't thin them down at all, but since I only want to slightly tint the skin tones, I thin them down just a little bit. I spray this very thinly over the entire model, which gives me the look that I want. This muted the highlights, so I come back in with the same mixture of burnt orange and pale yellow to add my highlights back. And of course, I forgot to spray her fingers. I would like to say it's because this is the first time that I'm filming and I was distracted, but I would be lying. I'll do them off screen. It's the exact same process as the rest of the skin tones. And no, it's not because all the footage is me going out of frame. Moving on, for her sleeves, I use Payne's Gray from Liquitex. However, I previously thinned this paint down a lot so I could keep the highlights and shadows for my zenithal. The astute of you will see where this is gonna go. I got this. Nah, I really got this. I'm built different. I'm gonna make this work. Damn, I don't got this. Eventually, my brain kicks in, and I reapply my zenithal highlight like I should have just done in the first place. Once my zenithal is in place, I can spray the Payne's Gray without any pain. Moving on, I start working on Ahsoka's van braces. I once again start with a base coat of Wolf Gray. Then I come back with Drakenhof Nightshade and get it to color match with the armor pieces on her legs. What are these even called? Shin guards? I'm gonna go with shin guards. Once I'm happy with the color matching the shin guards, I seal it with varnish and I mask the parts I just painted with Tamiya masking tape. I then spray dark silver from Pro Acryl on the van braces and the shin guards. This ends up being way too dark, so I mix in some silver from Pro Acryl until I'm happy. I decide I want her armor pieces to be worn and have some battle damage. So I cut a small piece of dish sponge and I began sponging silver on the parts. I should have unmasked before I started doing this, so the damage blended together. Luckily, I caught on quick enough. Unmasking. I give the shin guards the same treatment, but this wasn't enough. I wanted more battle damage. So I came in with a fine brush and started adding silver all over the place to signify scratches. There was one spot on the van braces that I got a little too excited with the sponge. I tried cleaning it up, but I ended up causing more damage. Not a big deal though. I roll with it and I treat it like an area that got extra beat up. I add some Drakenhof Nightshade to get the color closer to the rest of the van braces, then I add some more scratches. Now, nobody knows except you and I. For the soles of her shoes, I decide to use Dryad Bark and Gore Grunta Fur contrast from Citadel. I slap it on until I like the color. I want these strap things holding her shin guards darker, but not black. I was debating between two contrast paints from Citadel, Black Legion and Black Templar. Even though both have black in the name, they are not the same. I decided to use Black Templar contrast for the straps since it's a bluish black and I wanted to keep that blue hue. I used silver on... I actually have no idea what this is. I don't know, the strap holders. I used silver on the strap holders as I thought silver would tie in well since we have other silver parts on the legs. Since I already painted her pants, I need to mask it. And since I hate masking, I use saran wrap and silly putty to get the job done. I use a toothpick to press the silly putty into tight spots and up to the edge. Now that we have it all masked off, I can start painting again. I use the same Wolf Gray as my base coat, then I come in with the same Drakenhof Nightshade. Once everything is dry, I seal it with a gloss varnish. More unmasking. There are details on the skirting? Man, making this video has taught me I have no idea what armor pieces are called. Whatever it's called, there's detailing there, and I want to make it pop. The reason I used gloss varnish was for the magic juice. Tamiya Black Panel Liner. This stuff is great, once I figured out how to clean it up, but we'll get into that in a second. We want the surface glossy so the panel liner flows smoothly. I did end up testing this with matte varnish as well, and while it did work, it didn't flow as well. I ended up having to use more, so I added that magic juice into the grooves of her skirting, whatever this part is called, her van braces, and the shin guards. Now, as I was saying before about the cleanup, where I probably should have done more research before spreading magic juice all over the place, was how to clean up the overspill. I tried using water to clean it up, I tried using rubbing alcohol to clean it up. Neither worked. Looking through my paint rack, I saw I had some lacquer thinner, and in my infinite wisdom, I'm like, oh, this stuff is strong, I'm sure it'll clean it up. Yeah, sure did. Along with my paint job, once again, my brain decided to kick in just a little too late. I finally decided to Google how I should actually clean this stuff up. Apparently, the answer is lighter fluid. So I popped over to my local hardware store and grabbed some. And hey, what do you know? Being prepared by looking up how to use a product properly makes life so much easier. Am I gonna learn this lesson? Probably not. With that out of the way, I start working on her belt. I decide to go with Cygor Brown contrast from Citadel. I wanted a different brown from the soles of her shoes. I went with silver on her belt hoop. I really don't understand how this is holding anything up. For the little rivets, I decided that bronze from Vallejo would look good. Even more unmasking. She has the same strap things holding her van braces, so I use black Templar again, and I use silver on the strap holders. She has some blue buttons on her van braces, and to not have to paint 5 million layers of blue, I first laid down a coat of deck tan from Vallejo. I love this paint. It's an off-white, goes down smooth, and covers well. Now that I got a brighter base coat on the buttons, I'll use a Lothern blue from Citadel to paint them. I want her gloves to match her belt, so I use Cygor brown again. I also use this on her lightsabers, so I got a dark base for the silver I'll be putting on. I try to paint her lightsabers as close to the references I have. So for her left saber, I paint the diamonds a dark silver. And for her right saber, I paint the insides dark silver and the diamonds silver. To finish it off, I use Retributor armor from Citadel for the gold on the tip of the lightsaber. I move on to her face, inching closer to the part of the model that I've been dreading, which is all the freehanding I'll have to do. But first, I use some more Cygor brown on her headband and silver on the jewels. For her fleshy hair, I go with the trusty deck tan. I don't like using white in my models, as it's too bright and it throws everything off. I really should have just masked the face off and airbrushed this, but I really hate masking, so I decide to hand paint it. Now, I haven't painted in about a year, and my dumbass thought this model with a bunch of freehanding, which I've never been good at by the way, would be the perfect model to get back into things. Too late now. So, with the deck tan down, I use Abyss Blue from Too Thin Coats for her fleshy hair markings. This is the first time I've used paints from Too Thin Coats. I like how they spray out of my airbrush, but man, they get very thin in my wet palette. I was struggling to keep it at a consistency that I wanted. It probably didn't help that doing the markings took forever. I get the rough pattern that I want, and then I come in with a fine brush to clean up the edges. I struggled to figure out how to do the patterns on the back, but I think it turned out alright. Now that I finish all those markings, her face tattoos feel a lot less daunting. I once again use deck tan instead of white for this. I don't like how one part looks, so I use some rubbing alcohol to clean it up. It took some paint off the headband as well, since I didn't varnish it, but that's an easy fix. We're on the home stretch now. We just have her eyes and lips left to do. I use Magos Purple from Citadel in her eyes to get the pinkish flesh look in the corners and bottom of her eyes, which I thought I recorded, but apparently didn't. My bad. Sticking with the same, I don't want to use white on my model. I instead use Highlight Skin from the Nocturna Fantasy set for the whites of her eyes. It's a brighter off-white, so I went with it instead of deck tan. For her irises, I first use Cold Corpse Blue from Too Thin Coats to make the semicircle. I then come in with black from Vallejo for the pupils. And I finish off the irises with Gravestone Blue from Too Thin Coats. Now, I know I've said I won't use pure white on my models. However, the only place I will use it is the specular highlights in the eyes, which I did with Titanium White from Pro Acro. I move on to the lips, and I use Magos Purple on them, but they didn't pop enough for me. So I grabbed some Doomfire Magenta from Citadel. I rub some off in the middle of her lips after putting it on to keep that spot a little lighter. Then I focus the rest on the edges of her lips. All that's left for the head is putting some gloss varnish in her eyes and on her lips. Let's start putting this model together. All that's left is putting in the head. And done. On to the glamour shots. I'd like to thank you for joining me this far. Making this video has been an interesting experience, and I've learned a lot of new skills. If you feel like you learned something, or you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any tips or tricks, Let me know in the comments.